Hi guys, I'm Chris. I'm a Belgian London-based director. I was also the Unreal Engine artist and editor for our film Low Power Mode, which we filmed here at Modern Wolf. My goal is to help contribute to this wave of innovation that we're currently experiencing in the industry.
And I'm Victor. I am a Berlin-based cinematographer and colorist. I was the DOP and also colorist for Low Power Mode, and my goal is to learn as much as possible about this industry and help move it forward.
Yeah, and we'll basically do anything it takes to help with this, even if that means dressing up as extras to be our film. So I was the Flash, he was Extra One. So what will we be talking about? We'll just briefly introduce what the film or the concept is about, and then we'll present the pipeline that we had in our project and tell about how that journey through pre-production, principal photography, and post-production went. Briefly mention the triangle of VFX, small concept. We'll do a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of this technology, and have then key takeaways. So, low power mode, what is it? Well, imagine a mini civilization were to live inside your phone. Question is, what would that look like? Well, that's basically what this film would be about. And we built an Unreal Engine world and then shot that whole film over there at Modern Wolf. Yeah.
And so here we've built a little pipeline to kind of walk you through our presentation and the steps that we've been taking. And so we will now start with pre-production, and Chris will take it away with world building.
So, how do you build a world in Unreal Engine if you don't have any experience about the program yet? What we did was, first, I just watched this 5 hours basics course of Unreal Engine, kind of getting an idea of how to move around in the program, how to use those basics. And then what we did was we looked for a map in the Unreal Marketplace that kind of had a similar feel for what we wanted to create. And then we applied the Lego strategy. Now, you might be wondering, what is the Lego strategy? Well, look at it this way. When you are buying this map, you're buying basically a big box of Lego blocks, building blocks. These are all these assets, textures, all of these things. And with that comes one castle, which is this ready-built map that you can see in there. And to kind of get more used to working with this castle, what we did was we would rebuild this castle block by block to get a feel of, okay, these Lego blocks work well together, these textures work well together. And once I familiarized myself with this, I built the foundations of what the layout will roughly look like, and then used all of these assets to dress that. So we had a meeting with an architect and thought, okay, well, what would the inside of a phone look like if people were to live there? It was a really fun brainstorm, and we came up with this idea, which was a bit inspired as well by just what a phone actually would look like. If you open it, you have the big camera department, the battery and everything. And then once that was done, we would just, as you can see in the video there, place in all of these different assets to build that world. And this strategy allowed us to build this whole Unreal Engine world for around £400. And usually having these world designs can be a huge part of the budget. And this made it more accessible.
All right, a bit about the way we approached lighting in this project. Now, for me, for cinematography, obviously lighting is very important, but how do you light something that should match a virtual background? You're also playing with, as you can see in that map, we're playing with different colors. How do those colors interact with the green screen? How does that affect your key, and so on? So the way we approached it was, so that's actually a top-down map of the final environment, and we tried to do everything with practical lights in the world. Like this, we would have basically already a lighting map, and I'll get back to the lighting map in a bit. But what we also tried to do in Unreal Engine was to already light for the color grade. So because I would also do the color grade later, I tried to finalize the lights in such a way that basically it would be pretty much close enough to the final look of the film. That was because I didn't know how much flexibility I would have in the color grade with the background plate. And coming back to the lighting map, why this was very, very useful was because it allowed us to, and by us I mean camera and lighting team, to always know exactly where the lights should be depending on how we changed the angle of the camera, which in Unreal Engine is essentially spinning the environment. So we could have a very fast turnaround on spinning the lights so it matches with the different camera angles. Here I've got an example of a shot from the shot list we made in Unreal Engine with dummy actors. And here I kind of wanted to talk to you about the lights and the process we went through. So as you can see, there is the light bulb. That's a point light that basically in this case simulates the light that would come from a monitor. We knew we would want to do a screen replacement afterwards, and we knew what color temperature that would be. So we already kind of introduced this light to simulate the screen. And for me, this was very important because we would then, in the foreground, place a physical table that the actors would interact with. And we also wanted to have this effect on the table in on set when we were shooting. So in this case, it really helped us try to understand where the lights should be coming from, how they should be interacting with foreground and background to really merge everything together and homogenize the entire scene.
So once we've built the world, we need to run technical tests. And this is something we've learned from Rob Chandler and Gavin Saville is VP lock your environment. I think that's crucial that 5 days before that you bring your environment to the studio, you load it in, and then after that you don't make any changes anymore. Because what often happens is if you bring your environment on the day itself, there's so many small things that could go wrong and you will lose a lot of time, and you're paying everyone, the whole crew, cast, everyone to be there, and you want to be as efficient as possible. So what we did here was we had 1 full day to load in the environment. Originally, we just wanted to load it in and already test out all of the shots we had. It ended up taking a whole day to bring it in. Then we had 1 day at home to make any extra adjustments that we wanted to make after we saw what it would look like, and then we locked the environment. And what was nice was we made this shot list in Unreal Engine. The cool thing about it is we were able to put this shot list with the Moses setup, which means that instead of going in the environment each time after each shot, trying to align everything up, with just a click of a mouse, we could go, okay, let's go to shot 10.1. Everything is already loaded up. Get this already to start running. And then we have 1 more day to pre-light and test everything. Looking back, one key element that would be really useful to have is having source control, such as Perforce. What that allows you to do is to be working with multiple computer stations on the environment. So instead of us bringing the environment here on a USB drive, loading it in, all of those are linked, which means that if I'm working on my computer station at home, any changes I make are already happening and being updated in the studio, and we can test it out and make sure that everything is running smoothly. So that is a really useful thing to have as well. Once we've got technical test, we've got the world, now what we need to do is scheduling and making sure we've got a very efficient workflow. And this is, for example, what the schedule would look like for 1 day. And if you look at the setup times, there is, I think, maybe one thing that is noticeable is that there's quite a couple of zeros. The question is, how do you get to a 0-minute setup time? Is that even realistic? Well, we took quite an unorthodox approach of scheduling this, which was much different to scheduling films. Normally, you schedule it, you have a scene, and you get most of the things from that scene. What we did now was we actually scheduled from one angle. Let's say we're shooting a scene in this room, and we are shooting everything from this one place and are running through all of the scenes. And the reason for that is each time you, let's say you do coverage and you want to go to a different position, you have to change around the lighting. That takes a lot of time. And there is this common misconception that, you just move the Unreal Engine environment. So let's say, oh, you want to change this a little bit. The problem is every time you move the environment, you will need to move the lights accordingly, which costs you a lot of time. So we try to optimize to need to move the environment as little as possible. So we had our main location, or we had the main camera position set. We set the lightings, and then any small adjustments we would do with the camera. But in that way, we could shoot everything from that one angle and have this very efficient workaround. Now, this did have some benefits and drawbacks. I think one main thing is it was different for actors to work in this environment, because instead of doing one scene over and over, they would on the first day basically go through the whole story. And with that, of course, it was tough for them that they had to learn quite a bit of the script on one day, but also you front load the heavy work, and it allows the actors to really go through this emotional journey. So instead of having the scene go up and up, they are going from scene to scene to scene, and they really are, being able to follow that full journey in one go. Of course, what we did as well was all of this schedule is programmed in Excel. And this allows us to always have live updates. So what we would do is, let's say, instead of 45 minutes to do this, it took us 52 minutes. All of these formulas are linked to that and would always give us a very accurate estimation of what our rep time was. So in that sense, we could have a very flexible schedule as well. And drawbacks are, of course, actors have to learn a lot of lines for one day. Consistency for coverage is a bit more difficult because you really need your script supervisor to be really on it to make sure that, what you shot that day before, that because the coverage might be shot on different days, that you get that consistency. And it is quite a few rehearsals that you have on one day. So ideally, you can rehearse the scene with the actors and then use this approach of shooting everything from one angle first and then moving on. So now that we've gone through kind of the key elements of pre-production, let's have a closer look at what it was like making this film on set and using the setup and the tech that we have here at the studio.
So I'm going to talk a bit about the Ultimatte, which is what we use to pull the key and basically have our previs where we would see the foreground and background merge together. Now, as you may know, the Ultimatte is very powerful, and it was very, very useful for us to have it there to be able to control the key in such fine detail, and and then be able to also record all the different plates that the Ultimatte can output. And I'll get to this a bit later. Now, the benefits of using the Ultimatte were, as I said, it was very powerful. We could even use the DMX console that you can see behind the Ultimatte to fine-tune it by changing the intensity of the lights after pulling a key to get a more accurate key, rather than using the built-in fine-tuning options that the Ultimatte has. The benefit of this is if you try to fine-tune a key in the Ultimatte using these options, you're likely going to lose detail, you're likely going to lose sharpness. So this was a really, really nice workaround. And then, of course, it was also the efficiency of having this entire Blackmagic ecosystem from the camera to the Ultimatte to the recorders. This really allowed everything to function quite seamlessly, and it allowed us to record pretty much all the plates that we wanted at the same time, flawlessly. However, it also had a couple of drawbacks that we had to deal with, and that we then had to come up with solutions for later on. For example, one of the drawbacks is that it only takes Rec 709 in. So what that means is if you want to have the flexibility over the matte to grade it afterwards, you are stuck at the beginning with Rec 709. That led to us having to record a separate raw plate to still give us all the information and flexibility afterwards. Another thing that we would have liked to have, ideally, was to record just the foreground with a transparent background. This was because we didn't want to have to retake a key in post-production. We wanted to have a key as good as possible, and recording that with a transparent background would allow us to re-render Unreal Engine backgrounds in post-production. This is also because while we did have a VP lock, we were still encountering problems with light artifacts in reflective materials. And a lot of times we did have to make key adjustments or to re-key in post because we didn't have this flexibility that we were looking for.
All right, and what we used for this film was, as you can see on the left, and on the right, we used two techniques. And I'd like to just kind of make a small comparison now about what are, the benefits of each and how do they compare. I think the key benefit of maybe using green screen virtual production is the flexibility you have. If, as Victor mentioned, if something maybe doesn't work, if a material is flickering or anything, you can still continue shooting because you always have the option. I mean, ideally you get it perfectly. And as you can see over there, you already get to composite and it looks great. But even if something doesn't work perfectly or a material is causing problems, you can still continue shooting and you can always replace that afterwards. The problem with a LED stage is because you're getting it in camera, it has to work. It has to be right because any small errors will be really costly and difficult to fix later. So that means if anything with the screen doesn't work, the whole production is on hold. You can't, say, okay, let's shoot this or let's shoot something else. No, we have to wait for this technical error to be fixed. And our production had to hold for about 2 hours to fix an issue. I was on another virtual production shoot with a LED stage at Garden Studios. The shoot started at 9 and we were only able to get in our first shot at 2 p.m. And these problems that arise, and trust me, there will always be technical problems. It's just part of it. And in that sense, I think the green screen approach really gives you that flexibility to just continue on shooting and to keep maintaining an efficient workaround. And of course, both come with constraints and benefits. For the green screen, it limited us in some sense, in the sense of what lights we could use. Because as you see here, the LED stage we used for this very pink violet light. And that was something that was really causing problems with the key. If that light would bounce off on the green, that made it quite difficult. So the shot we did on the LED stage were shots that didn't directly work on the green screen. And then, of course, with the green screen, there is problems with reflective materials or green materials. But one key thing that works really, I mean, the keying here at More Than Wolf, it's really good. It's the best I've ever seen. You can have a scene where people are standing on the floor and it looks great. I mean, if you see here, the way this character stands here, the way the shadow works, that's something that's really difficult to pull off. And if you're using a LED stage, you always have the problem of merging, that background and the floor. These kind of white shots is something great that you can do with the green screen. So in that sense, I at first really wanted to do LED stage, but after having used this technology here with the green screen, I think there's a lot of benefits with it, and you can really get a very efficient shoot happening here.
All right, I'm going to talk a bit about DIT because it's something that we found out was extremely important, even more than on a traditional shoot. So for us, it was very important to have a very organized structure in the way we would record, because as we said, it was the first time working with it, and we didn't know if things would work out on set or if we would need to basically have to problem solve after the fact. So what we had for our DIT to record, it was 6 different files per shot, out of which 5 were video related. So the first one was the previs. That was just either a reference for post-production to fix things, or if it worked perfectly, then ideally we would have used the previs straight away. We also recorded a fill out, and this was the next best option after the foreground with a transparent background. Because what we did is we found a way to use the matte information and integrate it in Fusion to then use the fill out and make the background transparent. And as a safety, we also recorded Blackmagic Raw. This is for color grading purposes. If we had to rekey, if we had to make any adjustments in the post, that was our safety. Of course, there was the audio, but then also a very important thing was the Unreal Engine record. So this would be whenever a shot would be taken, in Unreal Engine, we would record the exact position of the camera and how, for example, even the focus is changed, how the camera is moved, how if there is a zoom in or a zoom out, all of this information would be recorded so that when we would render in post-production a background, all this information would be basically implemented, and so we could simulate the effect that a realistic lens would have on an environment like this.
All right, so we've done the production, and now let's have a closer look at how does it work to do the post-production for this. Well, there's theory and practice. In theory, what you do is, well, we have all these different plates, we have timecode, we can sync them all together and use DaVinci to create multi-link takes, which basically just means that each of these videos, if you open them up, you see all of these different layers. And this is really useful to, later if you need to composite or anything, you can do that without having a very messy timeline. And one thing that is great, with virtual production, you can get this live previs, which shows you already, okay, what does it look like if these people are standing in that environment? This helps a lot with lighting it, but also with doing the edit. Instead of having to edit a whole film with just green images and trying to kind of have a feel of what it looks like, or waiting a lot for post-production to, edit or do the VFX on every shot, you can use this previs to already get the first full edit and the picture log. So we would edit all of that, have the picture log, and then do the VFX for each shot. And that would mean rendering out the background in Unreal Engine and keying the foreground and compositing that. One key lesson I learned is that theory does not align with practice. There are a lot of obstacles that we faced, and I'm just going to highlight 2 of the biggest obstacles that we faced. The first was when we rendered out the backgrounds, they turned out to be much darker. The problem is we lit for a certain environment with a certain background in mind. If the rendered out background looks much darker, it just looks off. So we had to try and fix that. And because this is all very new, it's a new pipeline, there aren't that many resources out there. It took us 11 full days of just trying it out, involving the starting pixel community, having calls with a lot of people. Moses was looking at it. And then finally we found out the fix. In the color management talk at 2:15, we'll be talking a bit more in depth about how we fix that. So be sure to have a look at that. In brief, path tracing and different lighting settings were the key problems. And then another obstacle was, I don't know if you can see it here, the little flickering of that metal. So that's still something that I'm trying to figure out. Most of the shots that I'm rendering out need to run about 60, 70 different tests. This one in particular has been quite difficult, and it's still this flickering in the metal. So I don't know if anyone here has Unreal Engine experience and by any chance knows what could be causing that. Scott. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, we'll go over that then. And once we've got that, we need to step to the keying. And the system, the Ultimatte that Victor described, works really well for some types of shots, and for some, it's more challenging. As you can see here, this is straight the previous that we got. We didn't do anything with it. This is the key that we got. And you can see, I mean, if you look at the details in the hair, it's a really solid key. It works well for these close-up shots. As I mentioned earlier, it also works quite well for wide shots or even seeing the floor. You really feel how the characters are integrated in this by having them in this wide shot. Then where it gets a bit more challenging is if there's a lot of motion blur and if you're using lights such as red lights or very colored lights. And for those, we are going to use DaVinci and Boris FX Primate Studio to clean up the key and make it more detailed. And there's a small concept I want to talk about that is the triangle of VFX. And we're wondering, okay, what does this mean? Price, time, quality. Well, when you're doing any VFX work, and I think this even expands to other things in the industry, it's always a balance between these three elements: price, time, quality. Let's say you want to have a shot and you want to have it at a really high quality. Now, either you paid a high price for it to get it quickly delivered, but that will cost you quite a bit, or you want high quality, but you don't have the budget to pay for that, so you do it, for example, yourself, or it takes way more time. And for us, we didn't have a high budget since we're students. We do have the time, and we want to deliver the highest possible quality. So I've already now been sitting in the editing suite at our uni for about 2 months, working on it. Probably still another month that we're going to be working on it. But it's kind of this balance here between these three elements.
So here we did a little SWOT analysis of our workflow. So I'm going to start off with the strengths. Our workflow turned out to be quite efficient. It worked well for us on the shoot. It allowed us to shoot everything. We literally never had a single day where we went overtime because of how we did the scheduling, how we were shooting, and how we tested things in advance and were prepared to, well, literally take on any challenge. And it also gave us a lot of flexibility. So we ran into quite a few problems, but we still had all the tools necessary to be able to fix them, to overcome the problems, to if a plate didn't work, if a previs didn't work, we could integrate it. We could make a composite with a raw foreground and rendered background to make it work that way. A weakness, however, was, as we said, that it was not ideal for the actors. Sometimes it was quite confusing at which point in the film we were, especially if it was the same location, just jumping from scenes. It was a bit confusing. And it was also a bit challenging that there was no real standardized workflow yet. This is kind of what we came up with, not knowing what we would get into and just trying to account for any problems that we might encounter. In terms of opportunities, it allowed us to really experiment with this flexible workflow, and it's also a great opportunity for technological development. I think when you're working on these kinds of shoots and you're running into all sorts of different problems, whether they're technical on set or in post-production, by running into these problems, you get ideas for how to improve. And ideas move the industry forward. You get to innovate. And a threat of having workflow like this is you run the risk of running into large setbacks, like we did with the color management problem that took so long to fix. But overall, the workflow turned out to be very good for us, and it really helped us a lot on our film and also in post-production.
And so, what are kind of some of the key takeaways from this pipeline, from this strategy? One is VP lock your environment on time. Be preventative. Make sure that you have a backup, be prepared for things to go wrong, and always have a safety net. As we had multiple different plates, we have the B-roll, so we're sure that even if the key doesn't look good, we can still have the option to do it ourselves. And the Lego strategy, as mentioned, there are ways to build these really good, high-quality environments without having to, hire or like pay huge amounts to build that and build all these assets from scratch. And there's so many assets that are being built, and it's this database that's only growing larger and larger and larger. And really tap into that instead of, I think, trying to make everything from scratch. Use whatever you can find scattered on the internet and build that together into your environment. And I know it can seem challenging and daunting at first, but we did it, and it's possible. And we did it for low budget as well. So don't be afraid to try this out. And I think there's this one key message in the end. If ever you forget everything, the key thing we just want to also add is, don't be shy. Like, come talk to us. We're actively looking for new projects. If you've got ideas or anything, just have a chat with Victor and me. We'll be here, and have a great day. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.